The black Mercedes had barely disappeared around the corner of the Miami estate when Dr. Sofia Reyes pulled her phone from her bag and made the call she'd been planning for 3 days. "He'd just left for the airport," she whispered, her voice tight with something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite excitement. "I have at least 6 hours. Maybe more if the Chicago meeting runs long like he said." Which was ironic because Rafael Navarro had never planned to board any flight to Chicago. He'd driven exactly 8 blocks, parked in the underground garage of a property he owned under a shell corporation, and sent his bodyguards to the airport with his briefcase and instructions to make it look like he'd traveled. Because in Rafael's world, yet you didn't survive 2 decades at the top of Miami's underworld by trusting beautiful women with perfect credentials and coincidentally perfect timing. It had started 2 days earlier when Jackson Cole, his head of security, the former Marine who'd saved Rafael's life in Cartagena and hadn't made a single mistake in 10 years, had leaned close during breakfast and shown him 3 seconds of security footage that most men would have missed. Dr. Reyes, standing outside Rafael's study at 2:47 a.m., her hand on the doorknob, frozen in hesitation before pulling back and walking away. 3 seconds. But in Rafael Navarro's empire, 3 seconds of suspicious behavior near a room containing enough evidence to bring down half of Miami's political establishment was 3 seconds too many. The fear of a widowed father is a dangerous thing, because it doesn't breed caution. It breeds certainty. And when that widowed father happens to control most of South Florida's port operations and has enemies who'd pay millions for a weakness to exploit, that certainty becomes a loaded gun with the safety already off. Rafael's twin 3-year-old sons, Lucas and Mateo, had stopped speaking 8 months ago, the day they watched their mother's car explode in the driveway while hiding in the back seat of Rafael's SUV. 4 specialists had given up on them. 4 expensive, credentialed doctors had recommended institutions and experimental drugs and had walked away when Rafael refused to lock his traumatized children in sterile white rooms. Then Sofia Reyes had appeared 5 weeks ago with her Johns Hopkins degree, her published research on childhood selective mutism, and her warm smile that seemed to melt the frozen silence of the Navarro household. Within 2 weeks, the boys were smiling. Within 3, they were making sounds. Not words yet, but sounds, beautiful and hopeful and closer to speech than anything Rafael had heard since Isabella died. If this story already has you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Rafael walks through that door. Because what he's about to discover will shatter everything he thinks he knows about betrayal, loyalty, and the woman he's already decided to destroy. Jackson had run her background 3 times. Clean, pristine even. Daughter of immigrant parents, worked her way through medical school, published researcher, no criminal record, no suspicious associations. Nothing anywhere in her history that raised flags, except those 3 seconds at 2:47 a.m. and the phone number saved in her contacts under unknown, a number Jackson's best hacker had traced to Marcus Webb, a federal prosecutor who'd been trying to build a RICO case against Rafael Navarro for 2 years. A prosecutor who, according to their research, happened to be Sofia's ex-fiancé, the man she'd walked away from 3 years earlier when, according to the narrative she'd given Rafael's background investigators, his work obsession had destroyed their relationship. But obsessed prosecutors didn't just happen to have their ex-girlfriend show up to work for their primary target. Not unless the ex-girlfriend was the obsession's newest tool. So Rafael had set a trap, oiled every hinge of deception perfectly, and created the illusion of absence. This morning he'd kissed Lucas and Mateo goodbye, told Sofia he'd be back late tomorrow night, driven away in the Mercedes with 2 bodyguards, and waited. And now, sitting in his parked car 8 blocks from home, tablet in hand streaming feeds from cameras Sofia didn't know existed, Rafael watched as the woman he'd trusted with his traumatized sons pulled out her phone and made a call that would decide whether she lived through the next hour. "I'm in," Sophia whispered to whoever was on the other end, her voice barely audible through the hidden microphone in the living room lamp. The study should be easy. He keeps the laptop in the desk drawer. I'll have copies of everything within the hour. Raphael's hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles going white. Not from anger. Anger was too simple. Or too hot, too reckless for what he felt. This was something colder. This was betrayal wearing a doctor's coat, treason disguised as healing, and he'd almost missed it. Almost let this woman with her gentle voice and her credential-heavy resume destroy not just his empire, but the fragile, miraculous progress his sons had finally begun to make. He watched on the tablet as Sophia stood from the couch where she'd been reading to the boys. Watched her glance back at Lucas and Mateo playing with wooden blocks under the nanny's supervision, watched something flicker across her face that looked almost like regret. Then she straightened her shoulders, tucked her phone into her pocket, and walked down the hallway toward his study. Raphael started the car. The drive back to his estate would take exactly 4 minutes at current traffic. The 4 minutes for Dr. Sophia Reyes to walk into the cage she didn't know she'd built for herself. 4 minutes for Raphael to decide what mercy, if any, a traitor deserved when that traitor had been touching his children, sleeping under his roof, and planning his destruction the entire time. 4 minutes. Just long enough for the woman who'd given his sons hope to discover that the dangerous man she'd been deceiving was already on his way home. And that in Rafael Navarro's world, betrayal had only one ending. But here's what Raphael doesn't know yet. Sophia Reyes isn't the villain in this story, and the real monster isn't the one he's hunting. It's the one who turned her into bait. If you want to find out how a federal prosecutor, a mafia boss, and a desperate woman collide in a trap that will destroy all of them, smash that like button and subscribe, because this story is about to get a whole lot more complicated. Sophia's hand trembled on the study doorknob, and she hated herself for it. Not because she was about to betray a man who'd trusted her with his most precious possessions, his traumatized sons, but because even now, standing on the threshold of completing the mission that would save her brother's life, some small, stubborn part of her wanted to turn around and walk away. She closed her eyes and forced herself back to the moment this had all started. 6 weeks ago, a Tuesday afternoon. She'd been in her apartment in Coral Gables, reviewing her notes on selective mutism for a presentation she was supposed to give at a pediatric psychology conference, when her phone rang with a number she hadn't seen in 3 years. Marcus Webb, and the man she'd almost married. The federal prosecutor whose obsession with taking down Miami's criminal empire had slowly consumed everything else in his life, including her. She'd walked away 3 years earlier when she finally understood that Marcus didn't love her more than he loved the idea of being the man who brought down the untouchables. When the case files stayed open on the dinner table during every meal. When he canceled their wedding venue walk-through to prep a witness. When she realized she would always come second to his crusade. She should have let it go to voicemail. Sophia. His voice had been exactly as she remembered it. Confident, warm, the voice that had once promised her everything. I need your help. No greeting, no apology for 3 years of silence. Just need. And then he'd told her about Miguel. Then her baby brother, the only family she had left after their parents died in a car accident 5 years ago. Miguel, the middle school science teacher who'd never even gotten a speeding ticket, had been arrested on drug charges. Possession with intent to distribute. 15 years minimum if convicted. It's a mistake, Sophia had said, her voice shaking. Miguel doesn't... He would never... I know, Marcus had replied, and something in his tone made her blood run cold. But the evidence is solid, Sophia, airtight, unless someone makes it go away. The offer had come next, delivered in the same calm, professional tone Marcus used in courtrooms. Infiltrate the Navarro household. Get close to Rafael Navarro's children. Everyone knew the Mafia Boss had twin sons who'd stopped speaking after their mother's death. and use her expertise in childhood trauma to gain his trust, access his study, copy the files on his laptop, give Marcus everything he needed to finally build the RICO case that would take down Miami's most powerful criminal. "Do this," Marcus had said, "and Miguel walks free. Refuse, and I can't protect him from what's coming." She'd understood then. Understood with perfect, horrible clarity that Marcus had arranged the whole thing, that her brother's arrest wasn't coincidence but leverage, that the man she'd once loved had weaponized her family to turn her into a spy. "I'm a therapist," she'd whispered. "I'm a healer, Marcus. I help children. I can't." "You can," he'd cut her off. "And you will. Because Miguel is all you have left, and 15 years in prison will destroy him. You know it will." He was right. Miguel wouldn't survive prison. Her gentle, soft-spoken brother who cried at sad movies and spent his weekends volunteering at the community center teaching kids about science. 15 years would break him in ways he'd never recover from. So Sophia had made the choice. Had accepted the job Marcus had arranged through a contact at Johns Hopkins. Had shown up at the Navarro estate 5 weeks ago with her credentials and her therapeutic expertise and a USB drive hidden in her bag that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The thing Marcus hadn't counted on, the thing Sophia herself hadn't anticipated, was that her work with Lucas and Mateo would be real. She wasn't faking it. The techniques she used were legitimate, drawn from years of training and research. The patience she showed was genuine. And when Lucas had smiled at her for the first time in week 2, when Mateo had made his first sound in week 3, when they'd both started calling her Sophie with their small, hesitant voices, she'd felt something crack open in her chest. She was falling in love with these children. Not the performative love of an undercover operative gaining trust, but real, bone-deep attachment. The kind that made her wake up at 2 a.m. worrying if Mateo's nightmares had come back. The kind that made her research new therapeutic techniques on her own time. The kind that made every breakthrough feel like a personal victory, which made every moment of her deception feel like poison in her veins. She thought about Lucas this morning, hugging her legs and whispering, "Stay, Sophie. I don't go." Thought about Mateo's small hand reaching for hers during their therapy session yesterday. Thought about Raphael, dangerous, powerful Raphael, watching his sons with an expression of such desperate, helpless love that it made her throat tight. She was about to destroy all of it. Destroy the trust, destroy the progress, destroy the family that had begun to feel almost like her own. But Miguel's face swam in her mind. Miguel in an orange jumpsuit. Miguel in a cell. Miguel broken and alone. Sophia pushed the study door open. The USB drive felt like a stone in her pocket. Raphael's study was exactly as Marcus had described it. Mahogany desk, leather chair, family photos on the walls, and a laptop sitting in the top drawer, right where his insider information had promised it would be. What Sophia didn't know was that the laptop she was about to open had been waiting for her like a baited trap, and the hunter was already on his way home. Raphael's foot pressed harder on the accelerator before he caught himself and eased back. Speeding would draw attention, and the last thing he needed was a patrol car pulling him over while Sophia Reyes was breaking into his study. He forced himself to maintain exactly 5 miles over the speed limit, fast enough to matter, slow enough to blend in, while his eyes flicked between the road and the tablet propped against the steering wheel. On the screen, Sophia's figure moved through his study doorway, hesitant but committed, like someone stepping off a cliff. 8 months ago, Raphael had watched another woman he trusted make a choice that ended in fire and twisted metal and a silence so complete it had nearly destroyed him. Isabella. The memory came whether he wanted it or not. A Tuesday morning, bright and clear, the kind of Miami day that made tourists book flights and locals forget that beauty could hide danger. Isabella had woken early, kissed him awake, said she wanted to pick up fresh flowers for the living room before the boys woke up. Her car was out of gas, so she'd taken his keys, taken his Mercedes, taken the bomb that Yuri Petrov's people had planted under the driver's seat sometime during the night. "I'll be back in 30 minutes, she'd said at the door, smiling. "Don't let the boys eat all the cereal before I'm home." 17 minutes later, Raphael's phone had rung. Jackson's voice, tight and controlled in the way it only got when something had gone catastrophically wrong. "Boss, there's been an explosion. Isabella's car. You need to come now." What Jackson hadn't told him over the phone, what Raphael had discovered when he arrived at the scene, was that Lucas and Mateo had been in Raphael's SUV the entire time, playing their spy game in the back seat, hidden under a blanket. They'd watched their mother's car explode 20 feet away, watched the fireball consume the Mercedes, watched their father run toward the flames screaming her name. The boys hadn't made a sound since. Not that day, not at the funeral, not in the 8 months that followed. They'd retreated into a silence so absolute that Raphael had hired 4 specialists, each more expensive and prestigious than the last, and each promising they could bring his sons back from whatever dark place trauma had taken them. He'd fired all 4 within weeks, not because they weren't competent, though 3 of them had recommended medications Raphael refused to give to 3-year-olds, but because after Isabella's death, Raphael couldn't trust anyone who wasn't Jackson Cole. The former Marine had taken a bullet for Raphael in Cartagena 3 years earlier, had killed the shooter with his bare hands, had never once in 10 years of service given Raphael reason to doubt his loyalty. Jackson was family. Everyone else was a potential threat, because Petrov's bomb hadn't been random. It had been a message, a demonstration that Rafael Navarro's power couldn't protect the people he loved, that his enemies could reach inside his fortress, inside his family, and destroy everything while he slept. So Rafael had built the walls higher, installed more cameras, doubled the security staff, implemented protocols that turned his home into a compound and his life into a carefully controlled sequence of calculated risks. Control was the only thing keeping him upright. Control was oxygen, which was why Sofia Reyes had terrified him from the beginning. 5 weeks ago, when Jackson had presented her credentials, Johns Hopkins, published research, impeccable background checks, Raphael had said no. Absolutely not. No stranger was getting close to his sons, but Jackson had pushed back gently, in the way only Jackson could. "Boss, they need help, professional help, and she's the best I could find." Raphael had agreed to one meeting, one supervised session, nothing more. Right then he'd watched Sofia kneel on the living room floor with Lucas and Mateo, watched her introduce herself without forcing eye contact, watched her pull out a small wooden puzzle and simply start solving it herself without asking the boys to participate. And within 10 minutes, Lucas had crawled closer. Within 20, Mateo had reached out to place a piece. Within an hour, both boys were smiling. Raphael had hired her on the spot. Over 5 weeks, he'd observed everything, the way Sofia never raised her voice, never showed frustration when the boys regressed, never pushed them toward milestones they weren't ready to reach. He'd watched her arrive early and stay late, watched her research new techniques on her own time, watched her celebrate every tiny victory, a held gaze, a shared toy, in a sound that almost resembled a word, like it was a miracle. He'd started to believe she was genuine, started to believe that maybe, impossibly, someone existed who wanted to help his sons without ulterior motives. Then 2 days ago, Jackson had shown him the surveillance footage. 2:47 a.m. Sofia standing outside the study, hand on the doorknob, frozen in a moment of decision before walking away. Could be nothing, Jackson had said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Could be she got disoriented. Big house, middle of the night. Or, Raphael had replied, his voice cold, it could be exactly what it looks like. They'd traced the unknown number in her phone within hours. Marcus Webb, federal prosecutor, ex-fiancé. The kind of connection that didn't happen by accident. Raphael had made the decision immediately, set the trap. Plant a laptop loaded with falsified documents, port schedules that were 3 months out of date, financial ledgers with fictional account numbers, enough real-looking information to seem legitimate while containing nothing actually useful. Install a silent alarm that would trigger the moment the laptop powered on. Then create the perfect opportunity and see if Sophia took the bait. He'd hoped, God, he'd actually hoped, that she wouldn't. On the tablet screen, Sophia's hand reached for the desk drawer. Raphael was 2 blocks from home now, close enough to see the estate's perimeter wall. Close enough that if he pressed the accelerator now, he could be through the front door in 90 seconds. The woman who'd given his son's hope was about to destroy everything, and Raphael had exactly 3 minutes to decide what mercy, if any, a traitor deserved. Raphael's study was a monument to controlled power. Floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked more decorative than functional. The massive desk, dark walnut, probably worth more than Sophia's car, dominated the center of the room, its surface pristine except for a single-framed photograph of Raphael with Isabella and the twins, taken before the world had shattered. Behind the desk, Isabella's portrait hung in an ornate gold frame, her dark eyes seeming to follow Sophia as she crossed the threshold. Sophia's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, trying to steady herself, trying to remember that she was doing this for Miguel, for family, for survival. "I'm not a criminal," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm saving my brother." "This is survival." The words felt hollow. She moved to the desk, each step feeling like wading through deep water. The top drawer opened smoothly, no lock, no resistance. Inside, exactly where Marcus had said it would be, sat a sleek silver laptop. Too easy. Some distant part of her brain registered that detail, filed it away as wrong, but she pushed the thought down because she'd come too far to stop now. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the laptop, set it on the desk, and opened it. The screen flickered to life. No password, no security. Just a desktop filled with folders labeled in neat categories. Port operations, distribution network, financial ledgers, shipping manifests. Exactly what Marcus had told her she'd find. Exactly what the federal prosecutor needed to build his case. Sophia pulled the USB drive from her pocket, and the small piece of black plastic felt impossibly heavy, like it contained all her guilt compressed into 2 inches of metal and silicon. She inserted it into the port with a soft click. Files began copying. 5% complete, 12%, 18%. "Sophie, watch this," Lucas's voice echoed in her memory from yesterday afternoon. He'd stacked 5 blocks in a tower without help, his small face radiant with pride, looking to her for approval. "Did you see? Did you see?" "I saw, sweet boy," she'd told him, kneeling to his level. "You're so strong, so clever." He'd hugged her then, his small arms wrapping around her neck, and whispered, "Love you, Sophie." 3 words. The first complete sentence he'd spoken in 8 months. And she was about to betray his father so thoroughly that Raphael would never let her near the boys again. 42% complete. 51%. And her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with her free hand. "Marcus, do you have it?" She typed back with shaking fingers. "Copying now, 5 more minutes." His response was immediate. "Good. Don't screw this up, like she was just a tool, just a means to an end. Just another piece in Marcus Webb's crusade to take down the criminals he decided deserved destroying, regardless of who got hurt in the crossfire." Miguel's face swam in her mind. Her baby brother, who'd taught her to ride a bike when their parents were too busy working double shifts, who'd held her hand at their parents' funeral, who was sitting in a jail cell right now, facing 15 years for a crime she knew. He hadn't committed. "He's my brother," she whispered to Isabella's portrait, like the dead woman might offer absolution. "He's innocent. I have no choice. 73% complete. 84%. At that exact moment, somewhere in the mansion's security system, a silent alarm triggered. No sound, no flashing light, nothing Sophia could see or hear. But in Raphael's car, 1 block away, a tablet screen lit up with red text, "Study breach, laptop accessed, recording active." Sophia noticed nothing. She was staring at the family photos on the desk while the progress bar crept toward completion. Isabella's face, frozen in eternal happiness. The twins as infants, tiny and perfect, wrapped in blue blankets. Raphael holding them both, looking at his wife with an expression of such complete love that it made Sophia's chest ache. She was destroying this family, breaking what little remained of it. "What am I doing?" she breathed. "These children need me." But Miguel needed her more. Miguel, who'd sacrificed his own dreams to put her through medical school. Miguel, who was innocent and alone and terrified. 98% complete. 100%. Transfer complete. Sophia ejected the USB drive, closed the laptop carefully, returned it to exactly the position she'd found it. She slipped the drive into her pocket, where it felt like it was burning through the fabric, searing her skin. She turned toward the door and froze. Through the study window, she could see the curved driveway at the front of the estate, and pulling through the gates, sleek and black and impossibly horrifyingly present, was Raphael's Mercedes. "No!" The word came out strangled. "No, no, no! He's supposed to be in Chicago. He's supposed to be gone." Her mind raced. Hide? Run? Pretend she was looking for a book? Nothing made sense. Nothing worked. Like she was trapped in his study with stolen files in her pocket and his car in the driveway, and nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, no explanation that would save her. The USB drive felt like a burning coal in her pocket as Sophia heard the front door open, heard footsteps in the foyer, heard Jackson Cole's voice, surprised and confused. "Boss, I thought you weren't back until tomorrow." And then Raphael's response, cold as winter, each word dropping like a stone into still water. "Is Dr. Reyes still here?" Sophia's heart stopped. The hunter had come home early, and she was standing in the center of his trap. Sophia's mind raced through her options with the desperate speed of someone drowning. The USB drive in her pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The laptop on the desk was closed, but probably still warm from use. And there was only one door, the door Raphael was about to walk through. Lie. That was her only choice. Pretend she'd wandered in here looking for, what? A book? Admiring the architecture? Getting to know Raphael better through his personal space? None of it would work. She knew that. But panic makes people cling to bad plans because bad plans feel better than no plans at all. She forced herself to sit in the leather chair behind the desk, crossed her legs with a casualness she didn't feel, and picked up the framed photo of Raphael's family. When he walked in, she'd be looking at it thoughtfully. Curious. Innocent. Just a woman who'd wandered into a room and gotten distracted by memories of a family destroyed by tragedy. Footsteps in the hallway, measured, unhurried. And the footsteps of a man who knew exactly where his prey was and felt no need to rush. Raphael filled the doorway before he stepped through it. That was the only way Sophia could describe his presence. He occupied space in a way that made the room feel smaller, the air heavier, the walls closer. He wore the same black suit he'd left in that morning, but something about him had changed. The careful mask of the concerned father had fallen away, revealing something colder underneath. Something that reminded Sophia why people whispered his name in Miami's shadows. Dr. Reyes, not Sophia. The formal address landed like a blade between them. She looked up, arranged her face into surprise. Mr. Navarro, I thought you were in Chicago. My meeting was canceled. The lie came smoothly, practiced. Last minute. He moved into the room, but didn't sit. Yet instead, he positioned himself between Sophia and the door, not obviously blocking her exit, but making it clear that leaving would require going through him. His eyes swept the study with the precision of a man cataloging evidence. The desk, the laptop, the chair she sat in, her hands still holding the family photo. "How are the boys today?" he asked, his tone conversational. Sophia's throat was dry. "Good. Lucas said 3 new words during our session. Mateo laughed at a story I read him." 3 new words. Raphael's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You've worked miracles with them, Dr. Reyes." Worked. Past tense. She noticed. The blood in her veins turned to ice. Raphael moved closer to the desk, his hand coming to rest on the polished surface inches from where the laptop sat. So close that if he wanted to, he could open it and feel the residual heat from her use. Could check the logs and see exactly what she'd accessed. "I've been meaning to ask you something, Dr. Reyes." Sophia's heart was hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Of course." "How well do you know Marcus Webb?" The world stopped. The air left Sophia's lungs in a rush. Her fingers went numb around the picture frame. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at Raphael's face and watch his expression shift from polite inquiry to cold certainty. He knows. He knows everything. Her face must have given her away, the flash of panic, the widening eyes, the way her skin went pale. Because Raphael's expression hardened into something that looked almost like disappointment. He pulled a tablet from inside his jacket and turned it toward her. And the screen showed security footage. Not of the study, of the foyer, time-stamped from 20 minutes earlier. And there was Sophia, pulling out her phone, whispering into it. "I'm in. The study should be easy. He keeps the laptop in the desk drawer. I'll have copies of everything within the hour." Her voice, her words, her betrayal captured in high definition and played back like a recording of her own execution. "I trusted you with my sons." Raphael's voice hadn't risen. It didn't need to. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees with those 6 words. Sophia tried to speak, to explain, to say something that would make this make sense, but her throat had closed. Tears burned in her eyes. The USB drive in her pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric, a physical manifestation of her guilt. "Stand up," Raphael said quietly. "Empty your pockets." She stood on shaking legs. Her hands trembled as she reached into her pocket and pulled out the small black USB drive. She placed it on the desk between them with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. Raphael looked at it the way someone might look at a weapon pointed at their children. Then his eyes lifted to hers, and what she saw there wasn't rage. Rage would have been easier to face. What she saw was betrayal. Profound, personal betrayal from a man who'd let her into the most vulnerable parts of his life and was now watching her destroy them. "I can explain," she started. "Can you?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "Can you explain why a woman Marcus Webb once planned to marry just happened to show up in my home 5 weeks after my son stopped speaking? Can you explain why you were outside this study at 2:47 in the morning 2 days ago? Can you explain what's on that drive?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came. And then, from the hallway, cutting through the tension like a knife through silk, "Sophie?" Both adults froze. The voice was small, uncertain, but unmistakably real. Lucas stood in the doorway, his small hand clasped in Mateo's, both boys looking into the study with wide, confused eyes. "Sophie?" Lucas said again, louder this time. A complete word. A name. The first word either boy had spoken in 8 months. The child who hadn't spoken since watching his mother die stood in the doorway, Mateo's hand in his, and called for the woman who'd betrayed his father. Lucas and Mateo didn't run to their father. They ran past him, their small feet pattering across the hardwood floor, heading straight for Sophia. They wrapped themselves around her legs, looking up at her with faces full of confusion and trust. Trust so complete it made Raphael's chest physically ache. "Sophie," Mateo said, the second word he'd spoken in 8 months. His small hands clutched the fabric of her pants like a lifeline. Raphael stood frozen, watching his sons choose the woman who'd betrayed him. They hadn't run to him like that since Isabella died. Hadn't looked at him with that kind of uncomplicated need, that certainty that the person they were reaching for would catch them and keep them safe. The knife twisted deeper. Sophia dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face, but she forced a smile that trembled at the edges. "Hey, my brave boys." Her voice cracked. Can you go with Jackson for a few minutes? I need to talk to your papa." "No." Lucas shook his head, wrapping his arms tighter around her neck. "Stay with Sophie." A complete sentence. 4 words strung together with perfect grammar. Under any other circumstances, Raphael would have celebrated, would have called specialists, documented the breakthrough, marked this as the moment everything changed. Instead, he watched his son cling to a traitor and felt something inside him crack. Jackson appeared in the doorway. He'd been listening, waiting for Raphael's signal. The former Marine's face was carefully neutral, but his eyes asked a silent question. "What do you want me to do, boss?" Raphael gave a barely perceptible nod. Jackson moved into the room with the gentle competence of a man who'd defused bombs and handled worse situations than crying children. He knelt beside Sophia and the boys, his voice soft. "Come on, guys. Let's go see if we can find those cookies Miss Sophia hid in the kitchen. I think they're chocolate chip." "Don't want cookies," Mateo said, but his grip on Sophia loosened slightly. "Want Sophie." "I know, buddy." Jackson's hand rested gently on Mateo's back. "But Sophie needs to talk to your papa about grown-up stuff. Boring stuff. You know what would be way more fun? Cookies and that new puzzle we got yesterday." Lucas looked up at Sophia, his small face serious. "You come back?" Sophia's tears fell faster. "I promise I'll try, sweet boy." It wasn't really a promise, they both knew it. But it was enough to let Jackson guide the boys out of the study, each of them holding one of his hands, both of them looking back at Sophia until they disappeared around the corner. The door closed with a soft click. Alone again, the room crackled with tension so thick it was hard to breathe. "Explain." One word from Raphael, not a request. A command delivered in the same tone he used when ordering men to handle problems that didn't come back. And Sophia broke, not with begging or pleading or attempts to minimize what she'd done, but with truth pouring out of her like water from a cracked dam. Her whole body shook as she spoke, words tumbling over each other in a desperate rush to be heard. "6 weeks ago, my brother Miguel was arrested. Drug charges, possession with intent to distribute. 15 years minimum if convicted." She swiped at her tears with shaking hands. "Miguel doesn't do drugs. He doesn't sell drugs. He's a middle school science teacher who cries at sad movies and volunteers at the community center on weekends. He's the gentlest person I know." Raphael's expression didn't change, but he didn't interrupt. 2 days after the arrest, Marcus called me, my ex-fiancé. The man I walked away from 3 years ago because his obsession with taking down Miami's criminals became more important than anything else in his life, including me. Her voice turned bitter. "He said he could make Miguel's charges disappear. Said all I had to do was get close to you, gain your trust, access your files, give him everything he needed to build a RICO case." She looked up at Raphael, her eyes red and desperate. "He's my only family. Now my parents are dead. Miguel raised me after they died when I was 16. He sacrificed everything to put me through medical school. And now he's sitting in a jail cell for crimes he didn't commit, facing 15 years that will destroy him. So you made a choice, Raphael said quietly. I made the only choice I could. Sophia's voice cracked. But the boys... She pressed her hands over her face. Everything with Lucas and Mateo was real. The therapy, the games, the progress. I never faked any of that. They needed help, and I helped them because that's what I do. That's who I am. I'm a healer, Raphael, not a spy, not a criminal, a healer. Raphael listened, his face unreadable, processing every word with the same careful attention he gave to business negotiations worth millions. You have no idea what it's been like, Sophia whispered. See, living this double life, loving those children, and I do love them. I love them so much it hurts, while knowing that I was going to destroy their father, watching them smile at me, trust me, call my name, and knowing I was betraying all of it. She lowered her hands and looked directly at him. You can kill me. I know what you are. I know what you're capable of, but please, please don't hurt Miguel. He doesn't even know I did this. He thinks I'm just working a normal job. This isn't his fault. Raphael was silent for a long moment, then, Tell me about the day Marcus called you. Every detail. She did. The Tuesday afternoon in her apartment. The phone call that shattered her world. The evidence Marcus claimed was airtight. The offer that wasn't really an offer, but a threat wrapped in the illusion of choice. When she finished, Raphael pulled out his phone and dialed. Jackson, pull everything on Miguel Reyes, and I mean everything. Arrest records, surveillance footage, the arresting officers, the evidence chain, Marcus Webb's involvement. I want it in 20 minutes. Sophia stared at him, confused. What are you doing? Something I should have done the moment I suspected you. Raphael sat down in the chair across from her, the first time since entering the room that he wasn't looming over her. I'm looking at the whole picture. You want to know what I think, Dr. Reyes? She nodded, terrified of his answer. I think Marcus Webb played you. Raphael's voice was calm, analytical. I think he knew exactly which pressure point would make you compromise everything you are, and I think if I dig deep enough, I'll find that your brother's charges are as fake as the documents on that laptop you just stole. Sophia's face cycled through emotions too quickly to name. Hope, disbelief, desperate need to believe warring with the certainty that the world didn't work this way. Why would you help me? I betrayed you. Because, Raphael said quietly, my son spoke for the first time in 8 months, and they called your name. Because I watched 5 weeks of security footage last night, and I saw you cry at 2 a.m. over my children's progress while thinking no one was watching. Because everything you said about your work being real, I believe you. He paused, and something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly. And because I know what it's like to make impossible choices to protect family. 20 minutes later, Jackson returned with a file that would change everything Sophia thought she knew about the man she'd been trying to save. Jackson entered carrying a tablet in one hand and a manila folder thick with printed documents in the other. His expression was the careful neutral he wore when delivering news that would make most men lose control. Boss, you're going to want to see this. Raphael gestured to the desk. Jackson spread the documents out like evidence at a crime scene, which Sophia realized with growing dread was exactly what they were. Miguel Reyes arrested 6 weeks ago. Jackson's finger traced the timeline on the first page. The timing is interesting. It's exactly 2 weeks after Marcus Webb's last RICO attempt against you fell apart due to insufficient evidence. Raphael leaned over the documents, his eyes scanning with the speed of someone trained to extract meaning from dense information. Sophia moved closer, her heart hammering. Arresting officer, Detective James Morrison. Jackson pulled up a photo on his tablet. a hard-faced man in his 40s with a badge and a reputation. Morrison's been on Marcus Webb's unofficial team for 3 years. He's the guy Webb calls when he needs arrests that won't survive scrutiny but will apply pressure. What do you mean, won't survive scrutiny? Sophia's voice came out strangled. Jackson turned the tablet toward her. The drugs were found during what Morrison called a routine wellness check at your brother's apartment. No warrant, no probable cause, no legal basis for the search whatsoever. Any first-year law student could get this thrown out. Then why? Because Marcus Webb, as assistant district attorney, pushed it through anyway. Raphael's voice was cold, clinical. He buried it in paperwork, fast-tracked the arraignment, set bail high enough that a teacher couldn't pay it, and made sure your brother stayed locked up just long enough for you to feel desperate. Sophia's legs went weak. She gripped the edge of the desk for support. Jackson continued, relentless. Miguel Reyes's background, 8 years teaching middle school science, 0 criminal record, not even a speeding ticket, character witnesses. He flipped through pages, 37 of them. Parents, students, colleagues, all glowing. The principal of his school called him the most dedicated educator I've ever worked with. This is a frame job, Jackson said flatly. Textbook. Oh, Miguel Reyes is as guilty as a newborn baby. The rage that flooded through Sophia was so intense it felt like fire in her veins. He framed my brother. Her voice shook. He framed Miguel, an innocent man, to force me to spy for you. He destroyed my brother's life, put him in a cage, made him terrified and alone, all to manipulate me. Raphael's expression didn't change, but something dark flickered in his eyes. It's worse than that. Jackson pulled up encrypted messages on the tablet, text conversations he'd clearly needed serious resources to access. I found communication between Marcus Webb and an unknown DEA contact, encrypted but not well enough. He read aloud. Once she delivers the files, we move immediately. Daytime raid, maximum impact, seize everything. If the kids are there, can't be helped. Sophia's blood turned to ice. The kids? Raphael took the tablet, scrolling through the messages with controlled fury. Marcus's plan wasn't just to gather intelligence. He was going to use your access to plant additional evidence in my house. Evidence you didn't even know you were delivering. Then he'd coordinate a federal raid. Timing, midday, when Lucas and Mateo would be home. Jackson's voice was tight. Full tactical team, automatic weapons, flash grenades, the works. Marcus knew the boys were traumatized. Knew they'd stopped speaking after witnessing their mother's death, and he planned to send armed federal agents crashing through their home anyway. Sophia couldn't breathe. He was going to use my access to hurt those babies. The horror of it hit her like a physical blow. She'd thought she was protecting Miguel by giving Marcus what he wanted. But she would have been the weapon Marcus used to traumatize 2 children who'd already lost their mother. Would have been complicit in destroying the fragile progress she'd spent 5 weeks building. Marcus Webb made 2 mistakes, Raphael said, his voice dropping to the dangerous quiet that made grown men step back. First, he underestimated how thoroughly I protect my family. Second, he forgot that the monster he's trying to cage has very long claws. He turned to Jackson. Get me everything on Webb. Every case he's ever prosecuted. Every conviction. Every corner he's ever cut to get a win. Every witness he's pressured. Every deal he's made. And find out who his DEA contact is. I want a name and address within the hour. Jackson nodded and headed for the door. Wait. Raphael's voice stopped him. Also get me the name of the best criminal defense attorney in Miami. Someone who specializes in prosecutorial misconduct. Someone who hates federal overreach and loves making examples of corrupt DAs. On it. Jackson disappeared. Raphael turned to Sophia. You're going to call Marcus. Right now. Tell him you have the files. Arrange a meeting to hand them over. Sophia stared at him. Why? Because we're going to give Marcus Webb exactly what he wants. Raphael's smile was cold and sharp as a blade. And it's going to destroy him. The shift in the room was palpable. Moments ago, Sophia had been his enemy, his betrayer, the woman who'd violated his trust. Now, they stood on the same side of an invisible line, united against a common threat. "If I help you," Sophia said slowly, "I'm obstructing a federal investigation. I could go to prison." "If you don't help me," Raphael countered, "Lucas and Mateo get raided by federal agents with automatic weapons while they're playing in their living room. You choose." It wasn't really a choice. They both knew it. Sophia pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "What's your plan?" Raphael's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm going to feed him poison and make him think it's honey. I'm going to give him everything he thinks he wants. And when he takes the bait, when he moves to arrest me based on fabricated evidence from an illegal search." He paused. "I'm going to make sure every news outlet, every federal judge, and every ethics board in Florida knows exactly what kind of prosecutor Marcus Webb really is." Sophia made the call, her hand steadier than it had been in weeks, because for the first time since Marcus had threatened her brother, she wasn't alone in the fight. The phone rang twice before Marcus answered, his voice smooth and confident. "Sophia, tell me you have good news." "I have the files," she said, and Raphael nodded approval. "When do you want to meet?" 3 days. That's how long it took Rafael Navarro to build a trap sophisticated enough to destroy a federal prosecutor without leaving fingerprints. Sophia watched him work with a mixture of awe and terror. Raphael's study had transformed into a war room. Jackson and 2 other men she didn't recognize bent over laptops, phone calls conducted in low voices, documents spread across every surface like battle plans, because that's what they were. "Here's how this works," Raphael explained on day 1, his finger tracing the timeline he'd mapped out on a whiteboard that hadn't been there yesterday. "You meet Marcus. You hand over the USB drive. But the files on it aren't the real ones. They're documents I've had my team create. Port schedules that are close enough to accurate to seem legitimate but dated enough to be useless. Financial ledgers with account numbers that will lead federal investigators to shell companies that dissolved 6 months ago." "Why give him anything?" Sophia asked. "Because we need him to move fast, to file charges immediately before he has time to verify the information." Raphael's smile was cold. "Marcus's ego is his weakness. He thinks he's smarter than everyone, especially you. He'll see what he wants to see." While Sophia handed over useless files, Raphael's real plan would unfold in parallel. Jackson's team would extract Miguel from county jail the moment the charges against him were officially dropped, which would happen the instant Raphael's lawyers filed witness tampering and evidence fabrication charges against Marcus Webb in federal court. Simultaneously, evidence packages documenting every detail of Marcus's corruption would be hand-delivered to FBI Internal Affairs, the Department of Justice, and the Miami Herald. 3 different channels, impossible to suppress. "What if he suspects?" Sophia's voice was small. Raphael looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. "He won't. Men like Marcus don't see women like you as threats. He thinks he owns you. That makes him blind." The meeting was set for Thursday afternoon at Bayfront Park. Public, crowded. Plenty of witnesses. Raphael's insurance policy against Marcus trying anything violent. Sophia wore a wire. FBI-grade equipment that Raphael's contacts had acquired through channels she decided not to ask about. The small device pressed against her skin beneath her blouse, recording everything within a 20-foot radius. "Jackson and 3 others will be watching," Raphael told her that morning. "You're never alone. The moment you signal, touch your ear twice, we move." Lucas and Mateo hugged her goodbye at the door. They'd been doing that a lot over the past 3 days, like they sensed something important was happening and wanted to make sure she knew they needed her to come back. Come back, Sophie, Lucas whispered into her neck. I promise, she said, and meant it. The park was bright with afternoon sun when Sophia arrived. A family scattered across the grass, joggers on the waterfront path, normal people living normal lives, unaware that 20 feet away, a federal prosecutor was about to destroy his career. Marcus arrived exactly on time, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Sophia's monthly rent. He was handsome in the way powerful men often are, polished, confident, the kind of face that looked good on campaign posters and cable news. But Sophia saw past it now, saw the coldness in his eyes that she'd once mistaken for determination. Sophia. His smile was warm, false. Thank you for doing the right thing. The right thing. Like framing her brother was justice. Like terrorizing traumatized children was heroism. She handed him the USB drive, her hand steady. Here, everything you asked for. Marcus turned it over in his fingers like it was treasure. This will bring down the Navarro Empire. You've done your country a service. And Miguel? The question came out harder than she'd intended. Charges dropped by end of week. You have my word. His word. Worthless as smoke. Sophia forced herself to ask the scripted question Raphael had coached her on. What happens next? Will there be a raid? Marcus's eyes gleamed. This was the part he loved, the victory lap before the victory. Friday morning, 6 a.m. We'll hit the house when Navarro's guard is lowest. Full tactical team. He leaned closer, confidential. Even if the kids are there, can't be helped. Can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. The wire against Sophia's chest recorded every word. Yeah, those children lost their mother 8 months ago, Sophia said, the script abandoned, pure fury driving her words. They just started speaking again, and you're willing to traumatize them to get Raphael? Marcus's mask slipped. They're criminals' kids, Sophia. They were already damned. And there it was. The truth beneath the prosecutorial rhetoric. The monster wearing a badge. We're done here. Sophia turned to leave. Marcus's hand clamped around her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Don't forget, I own you. Your brother's freedom exists because I allow it. Sophia smiled, touched her ear twice. No, Marcus, you don't own anything anymore. Everything happened at once. Jackson's team emerged from positions around the park, cameras raised, photographing Marcus's grip on Sophia's arm from 3 different angles. Assault. No witnessed, documented. 2 blocks away, Raphael's lawyers walked into federal court and filed charges: witness tampering, evidence fabrication, abuse of prosecutorial authority. At county jail, Miguel Reyes was processed for immediate release, Raphael's legal team waiting to escort him out. At FBI headquarters, DOJ offices, and the Miami Herald newsroom, sealed packages were opened simultaneously, spilling evidence of corruption across desks. 90 seconds. That's all it took. Marcus's phone rang. He looked down at the screen, his office, and answered with irritation. What? Sophia watched the color drain from his face. Sir, federal marshals are here with a warrant for your arrest. Evidence tampering, witness coercion, falsifying criminal charges, conspiracy to... Marcus looked at Sophia, his understanding dawning with the force of a physical blow. What did you do? I chose the right side. Finally. A black car pulled up to the curb. Raphael stepped out, moving toward them with the unhurried confidence of a man who'd already won. Navarro, Marcus's voice shook. You can't touch me. I'm a federal prosecutor. You were a federal prosecutor, Raphael corrected. Now you're just a criminal in an expensive suit. Federal marshals arrived, badges displayed, reading Marcus his rights in the flat, professional tone of people who'd done this 1,000 times before. Marcus screamed as they handcuffed him, his composure shattered completely. You'll regret this, both of you. You have no idea what you've done. Sophia watched them load him into their vehicle and felt nothing but relief. Raphael appeared beside her. "Your brother's waiting at my house. Jackson picked him up 10 minutes ago." The tears came then. Joy this time, not grief. The drive back to Coral Gables felt different. Sophia wasn't going to the fortress as a spy or a traitor. She was going home to the children who called her name, and to the man who'd shown her that power without mercy was just cruelty, but power with purpose could save lives. 6 months later, snow fell in Miami for the first time in 40 years. It wasn't really snow, just cold rain mixed with something that looked white enough in the early morning light to make Lucas and Mateo press their faces against the living room window and shout with wonder. But to two 4-year-old boys who'd spent their entire lives in South Florida, it might as well have been magic. And the living room they stood in bore almost no resemblance to the sterile fortress it had been half a year earlier. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator in the adjacent kitchen, crayon masterpieces of stick figures labeled Papa, Sophie, and Uncle Jack in wobbly letters. Toys were scattered across the floor in organized chaos. Wooden blocks, picture books, a small plastic dinosaur that Mateo carried everywhere. The expensive, abstract art that once dominated the walls now shared space with photographs, new ones, capturing moments Raphael had never thought he'd have again. Sophia laughing as Lucas dumped sand on her head at the beach. Raphael holding both boys on his shoulders at the park. All 4 of them covered in flour after a baking disaster that had somehow produced edible cookies. Isabella's portrait still hung above the fireplace, but it no longer felt like a shrine to grief. It felt like a celebration of who she'd been. The woman who'd loved fiercely and taught Raphael that family was everything. She'd want this, he thought. This noise, this mess, this life. "Sophie! Sophie! Come see!" Mateo's vocabulary had exploded over 6 months, from silence to full sentences with the enthusiasm of someone making up for lost time. Sophia emerged from the kitchen wearing bright yellow rubber gloves, the same cheap dollar store gloves that had started as cleaning supplies 6 months ago. She'd discovered early on that the boys found the bright color hilarious, and what had begun as a therapeutic tool, using the rubber grip to help with their motor skills, had evolved into their favorite game. "Monster Hands is coming," she announced in an exaggerated monster voice, wiggling her gloved fingers. Lucas and Mateo shrieked with delight and scrambled onto the couch, standing on the cushions in preparation for the game they'd played 100 times. Sophia sat down, and the boys immediately climbed onto her legs, standing on her thighs while she held their hands for balance. "The tickle monster is approaching the castle," Sophia declared. "What do the brave knights do?" "We fight back," Lucas shouted, and both boys launched themselves at her, giggling as she gently tickled their sides while they defeated her with hugs and laughter. Raphael stood in the doorway watching, his tie loosened after a long day of meetings, and felt something in his chest unclench. 6 months ago, this scene would have been impossible. His sons silent, yet his home frozen in grief, his heart locked behind walls too high to climb. What had changed in 6 months? Marcus Webb had been convicted on 7 federal charges: evidence tampering, witness coercion, falsifying criminal charges, abuse of authority, conspiracy. 15 years in prison, the same sentence he'd threatened Miguel with. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Miguel Reyes had been fully exonerated, his record cleared, his teaching position restored. He visited every Sunday, bringing science experiments that usually ended with something bubbling over or making noise. The boys adored their Uncle Miguel and had started calling themselves scientists. And Sophia had stayed. Not because Raphael had asked her to, though he had, awkwardly, the week after Marcus's arrest. "You can leave," he'd told her. "No obligations, no threats. You're free." She'd looked at him with those steady eyes that saw through every wall he'd ever built. "Those boys need me, and I need them." It wasn't employment anymore. It was family. Their relationship had evolved into something Raphael didn't have words for yet. Not romantic. Neither of them was ready for that, and the ghost of Isabella still lingered in the best possible way. But it was partnership. Deep, unshakable partnership, born from crisis and forged in trust that had been broken and rebuilt stronger. They co-parented Lucas and Mateo with the kind of synchronicity that looked effortless but came from hundreds of small negotiations and compromises. Raphael learned to trust again, slowly, letting Sophia make decisions about the boys without needing to approve everything first. And Sophia learned that power wasn't inherently corrupt, that sometimes having resources meant being able to protect the people who mattered most. The boys had transformed completely. Full speech recovery, ahead of their developmental curve according to the specialists, who now worked with them purely clinically, with no hidden agendas. They called Raphael Papa again, a word he hadn't heard in 8 months before Sophia arrived, and they called her Sophie possessively, correcting anyone who tried to call her Dr. Reyes. No, that's our Sophie. This afternoon, watching them play, Raphael made a decision. He crossed the living room, loosened his tie completely, and sat down on the couch next to Sophia. "Room for one more? Papa." Lucas launched himself at Raphael, and suddenly both boys were climbing on him instead, small hands grabbing his shirt, and their laughter filling the space that had been silent for so long. For the first time since Isabella died, Raphael played, really played. Not the careful, controlled interactions he'd managed before, but messy, chaotic, unguarded joy. The boys tickled him, and he tickled back. They climbed on his shoulders, and he pretended to be a bucking horse. Sophia joined in, and the four of them ended up tangled on the couch in a heap of limbs and laughter, and yellow rubber gloves forgotten on the floor. Raphael caught Sophia's eye over the boys' heads. A look passed between them that needed no translation. "Thank you for saving them." Her look back. "Thank you for saving me." Then Lucas, still draped across Raphael's chest, said something that made the room go quiet. "Papa, tell the story about Mama again." Raphael's breath caught. And this part was still hard, would always be hard, but Sophia's hand found his, squeezed gently, and he found his voice. "Your mama loved you both more than anything in the world," he began, and told them about Isabella's laugh, her terrible singing voice, how she'd read the same bedtime story 17 times in a row because it was their favorite. The boys listened, Mateo's hand in Raphael's, Lucas leaning against Sophia, and Isabella's memory became not a wound, but a bridge connecting all of them. Jackson watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, a rare smile on his face. Boss finally figured out what matters, he thought. Later, Jackson would take a photograph, the four of them on the couch, rumpled and happy, completely unposed. It would hang on the wall next to Isabella's portrait. 2 families, one lost, one found, both precious, and both loved. That night, after the boys fell asleep, Raphael found Sophia in the kitchen making tea. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said. She turned, eyebrow raised. "What's that?" "Would you consider staying permanently? Not as therapist, as family?" Sophia's smile was her answer. She didn't need words for this. The decision had been made months ago, in a study where everything fell apart and somehow impossibly began to rebuild. Outside, Miami's impossible snow continued to fall, a reminder that miracles happen when you least expect them, and sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you lost.